Hey everybody, it's Tammy Lou, and we are a couple of minutes before our webinar this morning. What I want to do is give you time to make sure that you are familiar with the GoToWebinar control panel. And what you can do is just go right now, make some adjustments, make sure you can hear us, make sure you can see my screen. If you go into the control panel, you'll see an audio button there, and you can go and mess around with your audio. A lot of you have internal and external microphones, and you need to choose the one that you want to use, or the headset, and you need to choose the output that you'd like on there. If you're here today for the emotional money mistakes during divorce and widowhood, you're an advisor or an agent or a CPA, and you want to learn more about how to counsel your clients during this very, very stressful time in their lives, then you are indeed in the right place. I'm really happy to do this. Is more like a mission of mercy for me. This is not where I'm trying to hook up and sell a bunch of stuff. My idea is that this is a very, very important topic. I have my best friend who through this herself and made a lot of mistakes and has said to me time and again, oh, I wish I had met Christine-Luken before. I wish I knew about Christine before then. So we have Christine with us today. We have about 1 minute. I want to let everyone that was a latecomer get into the webinar here. So there's a couple of things. If you would like to get a piece of paper, I don't know if paper even exists anymore, Christine, in the digital age, but if you've got a pad and a pencil, you can write down some of the URLs we're going to give you. Obviously, we are going to send out a recording, and 1 minute, not that you really care, but I'm going to introduce myself here a little bit better. My name is Tammy Lou. I do marketing consulting for financial services, real estate industry, investments, and other sectors of the economy. And what that means is I help you find the people you need to get your marketing message out there. So here's my contact information if you have questions about anything on the call or who I am and what I do and how I can potentially help you. There's the information. That's my office number, 951-658-0492, and my email. And then there's that tiny URL there is for if you want to actually have a session with me, that's where you schedule it. It's tinyurl.com/talk to Tammy. And then Christine will mention this again, and I'm going to send it out to you guys in a message. But this is where you'll need to go. If you're a CFP on the call today and you want to get your CE credit, you have to take the quiz. Go to tinyurl.com/exam CFP. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest to you today. I came across her because she was doing some amazing work with the subconscious part of the decision-making process, which, believe it or not, it's like 90% of what we do is not controlled by what you see on the surface. It's controlled deep down inside in the subconscious. So for you as an advisor to really be effective and get people to make the right decisions about money, what you're going to have to do is dig down a little further down and find out what are the mechanisms that cause people to make these sometimes crazy decisions with their money. No matter how well you explain it, sometimes it's nothing to do with you as an advisor, and it's everything to do with what's going on in that person's head. So I'm going to give it over to Christine and make her the organizer, or the presenter, I'm sorry, and then she can tell you more about this fascinating subject matter. I hope you'll enjoy this hour. I think you're going to find a lot of good information here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy. Let's see. Let us get... All right. Can we see the presentation? Let's make sure we can see that first. Tammy, can we see the PowerPoint?
I can see your PowerPoint, and you just go up there and hit the slideshow. We'll be ready to go.
There we go. Ooh. All right. We're skipping through. Okay. Yes, today we are talking about emotional money mistakes that people make during divorce and widowhood. You know, this is really about learning to navigate these emotional situations with your clients so that you can ensure they're making wise financial decisions now that they're actually going to be happy with later. And so here's what we're going to talk about today. You're going to gain an understanding of the Kubler-Ross model of grief so you can recognize your client's emotional state and guide them to make good financial choices. We're also going to learn the 3 most common money mistakes clients make during divorce and learn the 2 big emotional money mistakes that your clients might make during widowhood. So my name is Christine Luken. I am known as the financial lifeguard. I'm also the founder of the Financial Dignity Movement. I am a certified financial counselor with over 12 years of experience coaching both individuals and couples. I'm an active member of the Financial Therapy Association and author of 2 books, including Money is Emotional, Prevent Your Heart from Hijacking Your Wallet. And I've also experienced the stress and the heartache that come from the breakup of a long-term relationship myself. So I can certainly identify with some of these emotional money mistakes during divorce, even though I wasn't technically married. So I call it my almost divorce. So personal experience is definitely a good teacher as well. All right, so, with both death of a spouse and divorce, the most important thing as an advisor or a coach is to realize that emotions are on overdrive during this time. These clients of the loss of a spouse, they might exhibit behaviors around money that don't seem to make any sense at all. So it's helpful to understand that people typically take action for 2 reasons. And that is they take action to either avoid pain and or increase pleasure. And so usually avoiding pain is a stronger driver of behavior. And so when you see your client considering something with their finances that is wrong, that is not going to be a good move for them in the long term, the first thing for you to think about is what pain or discomfort is this person trying to avoid, right? Maybe they're not fighting for what is rightfully theirs in a divorce. Maybe that pain they're trying to avoid is conflict, right? Maybe they're just so sick and tired of the fighting that in that pain feels more acute to them in this moment than a trade-off of financial gain down the road, right? So it's very important that when you have clients that are going through either of these 2 situations, that they are also seeing a counselor or a therapist, or they're part of some sort of emotional support group. And it's really important for you as a financial professional to connect with mental health professionals. So I have several marriage counselors. I have counselors who specialize in helping women through divorce. I even know a woman who's a divorce coach because, they need this emotional support. They need this mental health support, and they can't get all of that from one person. And you're not the expert at that, right? You're the expert at the financial, right? And the financial part of it. So it is important for you to ask that person and suggest and encourage and normalize it for them to say, hey, I think it would be a good idea for you to talk to somebody about these kinds of things. And I will just say from personal experience, one of the very best things that I did when I was going through the breakup of my 7-year relationship was to see a counselor. And there are a lot of low cost and some even free resources that might be available for your clients. So if your client is working a traditional job, counseling might be a part of their health benefits or part of their employee benefits. So it's super important that you normalize this and encourage them to take advantage of these resources that they really, really need. All right, so let's talk about the stages of grief, because both divorce and death of a spouse, it involves a loss. You know, whether it's the physical loss of their long-term partner or the loss of the marriage relationship itself. Sometimes there are multiple losses in these scenarios. So let me give you an example of this. About 2 years ago, I was coaching a woman who was going through divorce, and she and her husband both worked together. They owned a business together that they were actively working in addition to owning some investment properties together. So the husband was actually having an affair with somebody at work. So first of all, she did not initiate the divorce. He initiated the divorce. So there was that loss, the loss of the marriage relationship. He told her that he would continue paying her salary, but he didn't want her coming to work because of. She also lost her work support, right? Okay, so even though she was getting paid, you know, as you guys know, if you're going through a tough time, sometimes it's nice to go someplace and just be normal, right? And so she lost that opportunity to just go to work and not think about all the other emotional stuff, and to be able to shut that out, and or to have that support system. You know, many of us have, you know, been in an employment situation in the past where, you know, you get close to some of those people that you work with, and they can be considered part of your circle of friends and your support system. So she lost her marriage, she lost her support system at work, and the husband also decided that he wanted to keep the house. So the house that she had raised her 6 children in, he wanted to keep the house. All right, so right, she lost her house, she lost her job, her support system at work, and she lost her marriage. So we have to understand that sometimes it's not just the loss of one thing that a person is dealing with. Sometimes it is multiple things that they're dealing with, and that just raises the level of the emotion. And, you know, this is a woman who was not even necessarily bad with money or, you know, lacked the knowledge. Quite the contrary. When she was working with her husband, she actually oversaw the HR and accounting functions at the company. But the problem was she was so overwhelmed with this compounded loss that she really just needed a major amount of hand-holding, right? I mean, it was decision fatigue. She just said, I need you just to tell me what to do next. All right, so let's talk about the actual 5 stages of grief, because your clients might go through some of these or all of these. They can go in any order, and they can actually return to various stages depending on what they are experiencing. So this is known as the Kubler-Ross model of grief. This is probably the most widely known model of grief. So the first stage is denial, and your client might refuse to accept the fact that the loss has even occurred. They might minimize or even deny the situation or play it down, right? So it's like they don't even want to deal with the fact that this is happening. So it may be that their spouse has asked for divorce, maybe their spouse has already moved out of the house, but you know, the other person is refusing to retain an attorney, you know, and they're in that denial stage of not wanting to accept what's going on. And so in this situation, the best response is the truth delivered with compassion, right? So you may need to say, hey, you know what, here is the truth of the situation, and here's what we need to do to preserve your financial well-being. Now, the second stage is anger. So this is the why is this happening to me? So your client might become angry with themselves. They might become angry with others, or maybe even with God, right? Especially if, their spouse has passed away. They might argue that the situation is unfair and blame others, right? So if their spouse is having an affair, they might blame it on the other man or the other woman as, it's their fault that this is happening. Or it just may be anger that this person, is initiating the divorce and wants to leave. It can even be a situation where a spouse dies and leaves a financial mess, right? So maybe the husband or the wife died without any insurance, or the person died and left a big mess of debt that the other person is left with. So there may be anger associated with either death or divorce. So stage 3 is bargaining. You may or may not see your client go through this particular stage, but this is when the client tries to change or delay the loss. So for example, they might try to convince their spouse to return to the relationship, return to the marriage after a breakup, even if there's an unhealthy dynamic there. The other time you might see bargaining is if your client's spouse is terminally ill. Maybe they have not passed yet, but based off the diagnosis, it seems like that is imminent. They may try to do anything and everything to try and save that person. So I actually saw the aftermath of this when I was working in HR and accounting in manufacturing before I started coaching. I had an employee who actually reported to me, and she ended up getting a garnishment notice. And it was a pretty big garnishment. I want to say it was in the amount of $500 or $600 a month. And of course, she was very upset and embarrassed by this garnishment, as most good employees would be. And she told me the story behind it, that, her mother had been terminally ill, and she had signed on as a responsible party for an experimental medical procedure that actually had a pretty low percentage of success, but she had felt compelled to do this to try and save her mother. And the mother honestly didn't even want her to do it. She didn't even want to go through the treatment. And so, her mother ended up dying, and she dodged that medical bill for a very long time until it caught up with her, and they basically took her to court and got the garnishment. So, you may see bargaining, and you may not in your clients, depending on the particular situation. All right, so the fourth stage is depression. And what I want you to note is that this is not necessarily clinical depression. We could also call this sadness, right? The person in this stage, they actually have to go through this stage. This is where they are recognizing and mourning their loss, and that's normal. Your client might isolate themselves, and they might spend time crying and grieving. And that's okay. It is a normal part of the situation, but it is also one of the other reasons why we want to make sure that your client is connected with resources to help them process these emotions in a healthy and a productive way. All right, so let's talk about the fifth stage, which is acceptance. So at this stage, your client accepts their loss. They understand the situation logically, and they've also come to terms with it emotionally. So I just want to check the chat box real quick and see if we had any questions. So if you have any questions about what I've talked about so far, about going through grief, that this is a normal process. And, we also have to be comfortable with our clients expressing their emotions without feeling like we have to fix them, right? So if somebody starts crying, don't feel like you have to necessarily make it better. Just hand them the box of Kleenex and tell them like, hey, it's okay. It's normal to feel this way, and it's normal to express this and just let it out.
Christine, I had an observation. I just been
Yes.
reading a bunch of stuff, and I know that you've probably run across this too, about about gray divorce, about how many people over the age of 50 are going through divorce. Like everywhere else in the country, the divorce rate's actually starting to go down, except maybe during COVID when people find out, but do you notice, is it more difficult with someone who's been in a longer relationship versus maybe they've only been married 5, 6, 7 years versus 50 years?
Well, I certainly think it can be harder for women because especially if they have exited the workplace to stay home and take care of children, or have stepped down to part-time or taken some sort of break from their career, that can be harder on them financially, for sure. I think it's hard no matter, obviously if you're only married for someone for 6 months, it's probably going to feel a lot easier than if it's 16 years. But yes, we are seeing an uptick of that, and we certainly are seeing an uptick in breakups and divorces because of COVID. It's, essentially forced people into tight spaces with each other. And, if a relationship was somewhat rocky going into this, I can tell you for sure that my divorce attorney friends are all very busy right now. So yes, certainly can see that. And that actually leads into my next point, about handling money for the first time. And, usually we see this with women, not necessarily across the board, but, it's possible that because of this life transition, that your client, they might have never had to manage their finances by themselves. Certainly, it's more common with women who didn't work outside the home and have their own earnings. And so they're likely feeling ashamed or embarrassed that they don't know what to do. And so sometimes this can lead to the client withdrawing or not wanting to face financial situations head on because they don't want to look stupid, right? So the warning signs that we want to look and listen for are silence, right? So if you are doing 100% of the talking and they are not interacting with you and, giving you more than just a yeah or an okay, then that's an issue. We want to make sure that they really are understanding, what we're talking about and what we need for them to do in order to help us help them with their money, right? Obviously, if you see this look of confusion on your client's face, then, you can back up and say, I'm sensing that I might have confused you. Is there something that you need me to explain more fully, right? So always put the burden on you, not to say you look like you're confused, but to say, I'm afraid I might have confused you with what I said. Is there something that you need me to clarify or explain in more detail? The other thing you want to look for is blanket agreement. So if all they're just saying is, oh, sure, yeah, to everything you're saying, they might be saying that because they really don't have any idea what you're talking about, right? And sometimes it's hard for us because we're immersed in this financial jargon and these financial concepts day in and day out. And so sometimes we forget that not everybody knows what we know, even on the basic level. And certainly we don't want to be condescending to our clients, but we want to ensure that we're explaining things in a way that is simple and straightforward, and that we're not doing things like using jargon. So we definitely want to make sure that we avoid jargon, that we avoid the acronyms, all the initials. A lot of people don't know what that means, right? So even if you say, hey, I'm a CFP, some people don't even know what that means. So it's important that we avoid that jargon. We also want to encourage them to ask questions. We want to be patient with them and offer additional resources to them to increase their financial literacy. So one of the great resources that you might want to check out is my book, Money is Emotional, Prevent Your Heart from Hijacking Your Wallet. It is a personal finance book that is awesome for individuals really at any level of understanding. It blends the emotional with the tactical side of personal finances. And so if you've got one of those clients who really hasn't handled money on their own, that may be a great resource for them. And it's super easy to find. If you want to write down the website, it's moneyisemotional.com. They can download the first 3 chapters and check it out and see if that's something that they would like to read to increase their financial IQ. And it's likely, if this client is handling their finances for the first time, that they're going to need more hand-holding when it comes to daily money management. So they might need help with things like setting up online banking access with automatic bill payment, or setting up a budget app. And this may be something that you don't want to do. So you may want to refer them out to a bookkeeper, to someone who does daily money management type tasks, or to a financial coach who can help them with this sort of thing. All right, so the other thing to keep in mind is that money is like the third person in the relationship, in the marriage. So money is intertwined with many of the interactions that they had with their spouse. And even though your client is now single, he or she and money are still together. And that relationship actually needs to be healed. So a great conversation opener for divorcing clients is, tell me about the money disagreements in your marriage. So, how money was handled in their previous relationship is actually going to affect their current and future behavior if we leave this unexamined. And then certainly for widowed clients, you can just ask, tell me how money was handled in your marriage, before your spouse passed away. And it could be that their spouse was the one that handled everything, right? So this might uncover common money issues such as emotional spending, disagreements over savings goals, or lack of communication around the finances. And it could potentially uncover more serious financial trauma such as financial infidelity, secret keeping, or controlling behaviors. I have seen a lot of women coming out of marriages where there was a deeper level of dysfunction, where maybe their spouse was using money to control them. And so in that situation, you're probably going to want to refer them out to a financial coach who has a background like mine, who really understands the emotional side of money, or even a financial therapist. But you can kind of draw out more details when they say something that intrigues you, where you think there might be something more to this picture, by saying, tell me more about that. Now, if a client is being unreasonable, stubborn, or overly anxious about a financial matter, you can peel back the layers by saying something like, tell me why this is important to you, right? So sometimes it may seem like they want to do something that just seems very unreasonable to you, and you can't understand why they would want to do it because it is so counter to financial common sense, that there is a deeper layer, right? And so if you can say, tell me why that's important to you, you'll find out that it has nothing to do with the money, right? There's usually something deeper going on there. All right, so let's talk about emotional landmines during divorce. So the first one is using money as a weapon. This happens when your client feels like they need to punish their ex-spouse, and perhaps because that person was having an affair, or there was some other sort of misbehavior in their mind. And this manifests as reckless spending, unreasonable demands, and acting from a place of anger. So this is essentially the fight response to perceived danger. The most important thing is to remind your client that the best revenge against their ex is their long-term success. You know, getting in that sucker punch might feel good right now, but it could hurt their finances in the long run. And let me give you an example of this. A financial planner friend of mine confided in me about 3 years ago regarding a woman that was his client. And she basically got half of his 401k funds, as she was entitled to in the divorce. And she wanted to withdraw $50,000 because she wanted to buy a red BMW convertible. And this financial planner did his best to talk her out of it, but he could not. He could not talk her out of it. He cheated on her, and this was her way of getting revenge on him, right? Because she wanted to drive up in that red convertible to pick the kids up, or to drop the kids back off and throw it in his face that she had spent his 401k money on this red convertible. However, this actually boomeranged back on her, and I'm sure all you guys and gals who are financial planners are already like calculating this in her head. You know, she ended up owing taxes and penalties on the early withdrawal, right? So if we think about, you know, she's going to owe another 30% in taxes and penalties on that 50,000, you know, that's another 15,000. So that car did not cost her 50,000, it really cost her 65,000. But if we think about the lost growth on that money, if she had left that in there, and how much that car actually cost her, you know, by the time she reached retirement age, that could be several $100,000. So what's the solution to this, right? So if you can see that your client is heading down this path, yes, we want to remind them that the best revenge is success, their long-term success, but help your clients find productive outlets for anger and frustration. You know, I regularly recommend activities like kickboxing, axe throwing, yoga, you know, anything where they
Axe
are
throwing,
letting.
axe throwing at your ex. Is that what we're doing here? X. Oh,
You
I
know
thought you
what?
said X. I thought you said X throwing. I thought that was like throwing your ex across the room kind of thing.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
smashing things. No, I don't know if this is like a nationwide thing, but in the Midwest, there are these AXE throwing, I don't know, studios that have been popping up where you can actually go and pay to throw axes at a wall to get out your frustration.
Gosh, Christine, I thought California was weird, but you guys in the Midwest, I'm starting to wonder about you. Okay.
No, I know. So, hey, whatever it takes to get that frustration out, that's the most important thing. All right, so the second emotional landmine during divorce is actually the opposite. And this is giving away the store. You know, your client is tired of fighting and they just want the divorce to be over. And, I've been through this myself, so when I was with my ex, we were engaged. We were not married, but I did have wedding dress in the closet. We had the hall booked, the whole 9 yards. By the time I left the relationship, I was so tired of fighting that I just wanted to run away. Like, I did not want to fight about one more thing. And so obviously, when you're not married and you're going through a major breakup, there are some things that are a little bit different. However, keep this in mind for some of your clients who are ending a long-term relationship that wasn't necessarily a marriage relationship, because my ex and I were financially entangled. We had names, actually, almost everything was in my name, but he was actually an authorized user on some of my accounts. His car was actually registered in my name and under my insurance because he had a DUI. So, there was still a lot of financial untangling that needed to happen. But, I was ready, and I did. I gave away the store because I pretty much agreed to almost anything just to get it behind me. And so your clients might be going through the same thing. If they're tired of fighting, if they dislike conflict and disagreement, they just want to move on with their lives. However, if your client doesn't stand up for themselves, they might receive less than their fair share and regret it later. So we want to remind clients that spousal and child support and visitation agreements are challenging to amend. So it's important not to rush this process. So this particular client is exhibiting the flight response to stress, right? They just want to run away. So we want to encourage our clients to be assertive and to stand up for themselves. Now, hopefully they have a good divorce attorney that should be helping them with this and advocating for them on their behalf during the divorce process. Now, sometimes you may find that clients have a hard time advocating for themselves, so sometimes it helps to appeal to a higher cause. Women in general are very giving, and I find that usually they are the ones that are more prone to this particular mistake than men are. Not to say it's 100% across the board, but a majority of the time, if someone is giving away the store, it is probably the woman. And that's because we have been trained by society to get along, to cooperate, to be generous. And so, if you have a female client who is not willing to stand up for herself, sometimes it helps to appeal to a higher cause, especially if she has children, right? So you might see someone who is very kind and sweet and cooperative, but as soon as you mess with her kids, you have awoken Mama Bear, and she is coming for you, right? So we can appeal to this side of people, right? And we can remind them like, hey, if you don't receive a favorable financial agreement, that's less money for you to spend on your children. Or even if they don't have children, maybe there is a cause that they are particularly passionate about. Maybe they love animals and that it's one of their core values to give more money to the local animal shelter. Well, you can say, hey, look, you know what, if you don't stand up and get what you are absolutely entitled to have in this divorce, that's less money that you're going to be able to donate to this cause. Because sometimes people they're more likely to advocate and protect someone else than they are themselves. All right, so let's talk about the third and final divorce emotional landmine. And that is the deer in the headlights. So this happens when your client is paralyzed and unwilling or unable to take productive action. This usually is a result of your client feeling either overwhelmed or confused. And so we refer to this as the freeze response to stress. And this can actually be worse than the fight or flight. And, if your client is exhibiting this freeze response, most of the time they're not the one that initiated the divorce. So just the whole fact of the divorce might have been a shock to them. They didn't see it coming. And that may have initiated the feeling of being the deer in the headlights. So they might actually be in a state of shock or denial. But we want to remind them that refusing to make a decision actually is a decision. And this delay could force them into an unfavorable course of action by default, right? So if they refuse to do nothing for a certain period of time, they're going to get bottlenecked into a situation where they might be forced to take a particular course of action just because they refused to be proactive and tackle the situation head on. So first of all, we want to find out if the deer in the headlights client is, number one, overwhelmed, or number two, confused. If they're overwhelmed, we want to give them baby steps. So your client might only be able to handle one financial to-do item at a time. So I know we like to be efficient. We like to give our clients as much information as possible. In this situation, this could be detrimental to the client. So leave your office and you've given them a list of 10 things that they have to do, and they are experiencing this, they're not going to get any of them done. None of them. So what you might need to do is to say, within this next week, I need you to do this one thing. And then after you do this one thing, let me know and I'll tell you what to do next. Now, if your client is the second option, if they're just confused, determine exactly what they need to know and explain it as simply as possible. And this may be the client who is experiencing deer in the headlights because they are that person that's handling the finances for the first time. And certainly, if your client is traditionally employed, see if they have that counseling benefit as part of their health insurance or their program. Because this is, trust me, this is going to be a huge help. Having this financial coaching / counseling in tandem with having them talk to a counselor about the emotional relational issues, they are actually going to move through those stages of grief to acceptance much sooner, which means they are going to be in a better, more productive situation much more quickly. All right, so let's talk about mistakes that happen during widowhood specifically. And, this is certainly a very vulnerable time for your client. And it's likely that well-meaning friends and family members will come forward to give them financial advice. But unfortunately, most of these people don't have a complete picture of your client's money situation. So you want to caution your client against making financial decisions without your input. And that's not to say like, oh, you shouldn't do anything without me. You want to position yourself as their advocate, right? You want to say, look, you know, I have the full picture of what's going on with all of your finances, not just your day-to-day spending, not just your assets, but also your investments, your insurance. You know, I have the complete picture. And yes, it may be good advice that this person is giving to you based off of what they know, but it may or may not be the best move for you based on the big picture. So you want to encourage them not to be making major financial decisions without at least discussing them first with you. And you can even offer to use one of your financial sessions to meet together with other members of your client's money team. So maybe with their attorney, their banker, or their CPA, to be their advocate. You essentially want to be, to use a sports analogy, you want to be their financial quarterback, right? You want to make sure that you are helping to coordinate the entire financial picture for them. So one of the things that I caution widow clients against is making major financial decisions or changes within the first 6 months of their spouse's death. Their job in the first 6 months of widowhood is to grieve and to engage in self-care. And of course, counseling. Now, there might be some money decisions that have to be made sooner, and you can help them make the best decision for their long-term financial health. So if you are working with clients who are in the first 6 months after the death of their spouse, your main goal really is to help them get a handle on their financial big picture and to set up a simple system for them to manage the day-to-day finances in a way that's not overwhelming. Now, some clients will want to make big sweeping changes shortly after their spouse dies, such as selling the house, selling or get rid of all of their spouse's things, moving, etc. You know, I actually do my best to caution against this. Because they may end up getting rid of things that they regret later. You know, your client might not want any reminders of their spouse because it makes them sad. But honestly, this is part of the grieving process that can't be ignored. And I can just say, like, if I pass away before my husband, I can totally see him doing that. I can totally see him saying, it makes me too sad to see any reminders. I'm going to sell the house, I'm going to sell everything and like go move to another state. But honestly, that's not a healthy way to do things, right? And let me give you another example. So I coached a woman in her early 50s who was unexpectedly widowed. And in the first session, my client said that she wanted to sell the piece of land that she and her husband had intended to build their dream home on. And I advised her to wait because there was honestly no compelling reason for her to sell this piece of land. You know, financially, it just didn't make sense. There was very little in the way of expenses. You know, it wasn't like there was any upkeep. It was just raw land with, you know, a small amount of property tax every year. So I advised her not to sell it, at least within the first 6 months. So eventually, the woman ended up selling the land to her grown son, who ended up building his family's home there. So it ended up having a happy ending. that land ended up staying in the family. And even though she herself and her husband didn't live on this land, their children and their grandchildren did. So we want to, advise against big sweeping changes within the first 6 months. Now, certainly, yes, there are some things that we do need to handle, but typically we don't need to get rid of everything and make all these decisions immediately.
Hey, Christine, David had a comment that the coach, the financial coach is the offensive coordinator, and the client is actually the quarterback. Yeah. So there's a sports fan.
I was gonna say, I bet he's a football fan, and I know very little about football. But yes, you are absolutely
you're
correct.
From the Midwest, and you're from the Midwest, and you don't know football. What is wrong with you?
You know what? My husband and I are not big sports fans unless it comes to mixed martial arts, and that's why I love that kickboxing analogy of, the sucker punch that some of those
and you're throwing axes, but we won't go there. That's really
so on the flip side of the person that wants to change everything, we also have the other clients who resist making any changes at all, even a year or more later. And that's not healthy either. Sometimes they feel like selling the house or their spouse's car or motorcycle, etc., is a betrayal or an abandonment of that person. And neither of these extremes is healthy, which is why it really is absolutely vital that your client get counseling to help them through this process. And I've actually seen this in action. My husband's best friend, his father passed away when he was just 16. And up until recently, his mother changed absolutely nothing about the interior of their house and still had many of his cars, and they were nice, like classic cars, etc., but they basically just let them deteriorate for pretty much 30 years, where she hardly changed anything in the house. And so that's not really a healthy way to go either. So obviously it's not your job to fix it, but it is your job to encourage them to get counseling, but also to tell them hey, now is probably an appropriate time to sell this or make these changes. And I'm sure some of you financial planners have seen where people will hang on to a certain single stock because they're hanging on to a Ford stock because their dad worked at Ford or their husband worked at Ford or something like that, where it doesn't make any financial sense at all. It's just purely sentimental. And certainly there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not damaging their overall financial picture. So like I said, we just want to make sure that for these clients that we have personal finance resources available for them and connect them with the mental health professionals if that's what they need and they are not already connected. All right, so that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. Tammy and I are certainly going to follow up via email to make sure you have the link to take your quiz to get your CEs, and I certainly encourage you to do that sooner rather than later, so all of this is very top of mind for you. And I will also be sending you the PDF, which has a lot of this information in there as well via email. And just wanted to see if anyone had any questions. Maybe Tammy, you can check the chat box, or even if you want to take somebody off of mute, if they had any pressing questions that they wanted answered.
Sure, and thank you, Christine. I mean, I really think this material is going to get you started, helping your clients better. David said, please don't throw any axes in your kickboxing ring, Christine. Okay.
I'll try not to. I
No,
know. I like
this
to
is
think of
just
myself as
scratching.
a violent person.
Well, this is just scratching the surface. I have personally known so many people in my own family and people that I've worked with who've gone through this. Many of the advisors on this call I know personally, and they themselves have gone through these very same stages. So it's
Yeah.
good to keep this in mind and tell us a little bit about where they can go if they want to get better at this and make it sort of a subspecialty. Is there a way for them to do that?
Yes. Yes,
Let me put my,
absolutely.
you should give me the presentation back and I'll put my little link up here.
Yeah,
I'll,
absolutely. Let me figure out how I can do this.
because
How I can
I
pass
want to
you
thank
back.
everybody on the call too, because it just shows a lot about you as an advisor
There
that you
we
want
go.
to learn how to help people out. Um, yeah, there we go.
Did I pass it back to you, or am I
Yeah,
just trying to type to you?
no, you just click on my name and then make me the presenter. I think I got it. Here we go.
Okay, there
All
you
right,
go.
there's my puppy.
Aw,
Okay, so everybody that wants to look at this and explore it a little further and maybe use that as a marketing differentiator, it certainly would be, is
yes.
tinyurl.com/TJD link. Again, that's tinyurl.com/TJD link. And you'll find out more about the wonderful class that Christine has that gives you even more in-depth insight. Um, this is this is amazing
Yeah,
material really to get
if I can
into.
interject real quick.
Sure.
So you guys have basically experienced one of the modules of my course, Foundations of Financial Dignity. And it's an 8-week course that dives into the emotional side of money in every aspect. So we talk about spending, we talk about saving, we talk about debt reduction, we talk about money in relationships. We talk about, trying to think of all the things we talk about. We really dive deep in the first module about understanding your client's emotional money behaviors. At the beginning, Tammy kind of teased out the fact that so much of our actions are driven by our unconscious mind, and just having that in-depth knowledge about what is going on in your clients' heads, um, it can really take the frustration factor down. Because I'm sure that all of you have had this instance of when you've said, I can't believe you did that. Like, I've given you this great advice and you have like completely done the opposite, and then you're so frustrated by it because you don't understand why they're doing it. That's what this does. It is giving you that peek behind the curtain, but also giving you tangible tools to help your clients overcome those emotional money triggers so that they can actually succeed with their finances and become better clients for you.
Exactly. And it'll also help you, get more referrals because I know people that are good at this, they get a lot of referrals because they just bring an added dimension and a value to that relationship where, they're recommending products, sure, but they're also helping that person get a team built. And so you can actually be the person that helps that divorced or widowed person build up a really good financial team. And I'm always happy. Those of you who've been with me a long time, like Chuck and some of the other people, that I like this stuff a lot, and I think it is so important for you as a financial person to understand these concepts. I really want to thank everyone for being here. We will be sending out a recording. The recording will also have the link again. If you look on your chat box, I did send out the link once for the CFP people that are on the call, which is tinyurl.com/exam CFP. It's all one word. The other thing is Chuck Futel, I hope I said that right, said, good job, Christine. So he must be a
Thanks,
friend
Chuck.
of yours. Anyway,
Yes,
thank you so much
yes.
for being here, guys. If you need anything else, please reach out to me or Christine, and we'll be happy to help you out. Again, thanks all of you heart-centered advisors. You give me hope during COVID. A lot of you have been reaching out to me and helping me out with my own situation. So thanks a lot, and love you all. Thanks, Christine, and we will talk
Thank
again.
you.
Take care.